Chapter 1. The Beginning of the Operation. Chicago, one of the largest cities in America, shone at night with its towering skyscrapers, a true reflection of the modern world. But behind those lights lurked an entrenched network of corruption that had remained unsolved for years. Detective Ethan Cole, a seasoned officer with 15 years on the force, was one of the most relentless men chasing down that web of deceit. When Ethan arrived at the precinct early in the morning, his partner, Detective Sarah Miller, was already waiting for him. Sarah, known for her sharp intellect and tough demeanor, was the person Ethan trusted the most. "We've got something big this time, Ethan," Sarah said, handing him a file. "Tell me how big, or I won't open it," Ethan replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "A corruption ring that owns half of Chicago," Sarah whispered. Ethan's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. The file contained names of bribed businessmen, drug traffickers, and, most importantly, high-ranking officials within the judicial system. But one name stood out: Judge Richard Vaughn. For years, Richard Vaughn had been known as a champion of justice. Seeing his name on this list meant one thing: a massive scandal. But deep down, Ethan felt this case ran even deeper than they realized. Chapter 2. Hidden Connections. As the investigation progressed, Ethan and Sarah began looking into Vaughn's past cases. Something unusual caught their attention: a pattern of dismissed cases due to lack of evidence. Business moguls and crime lords who should have been convicted had all walked free under his rulings. But what truly shook Ethan was a case buried in the records: his father's murder. Holding his breath, Ethan opened the old file. His father, Michael Cole, had been a police officer gathering evidence against a major crime syndicate when he was killed. The case had been closed, citing a lack of suspects. And now, Ethan saw something new. The final ruling had been signed by Judge Richard Vaughn. "This can't be a coincidence," Ethan muttered, his eyes burning with rage. "The same man who buried your father's case is the one we're investigating now? No way. That's gotta be a message," Sarah said. Chapter 3. The Judge's True Face. Ethan knew he had to go after Vaughn, but accusing a judge was no easy task. Without solid proof, he would be risking not just his career, but his life. He decided to confront Vaughn face to face. After court adjourned one day, Ethan arranged a private meeting with the judge. As he stepped into Vaughn's luxurious office, the judge greeted him with an eerie calmness. "Detective Cole, it's interesting to see you here," Vaughn said with a smirk. "Not as interesting as facing the man who buried my father's case," Ethan shot back. Vaughn tilted his head slightly, letting a silence hang between them before he finally spoke. "Let me teach you something, Ethan. Justice is a concept shaped by the powerful. Your father wanted to do the right thing, but sometimes the truth is too dangerous for the system to handle." Ethan clenched his fists. "Did you have him killed?" he demanded. Vaughn took a slow breath, then smiled. "I don't kill people, Detective. I simply guide them toward asking the right or wrong questions." That was all Ethan needed. Vaughn had just admitted his role without actually saying the words. But the judge had power, connections, and influence. Taking him down would require undeniable evidence. Chapter 4. Hunter and Prey. Ethan and Sarah orchestrated a covert operation to expose Vaughn's illegal dealings. A trusted undercover agent within the police force, Mark Rodriguez, secretly recorded Vaughn accepting a bribe from a businessman. This was the smoking gun they needed, but Vaughn was still one step ahead. That night, Ethan received a warning. His car exploded in front of his house. He knew it was Vaughn's doing, but he wouldn't back down. The next morning, the leaked audio recordings of Vaughn's corruption spread like wildfire across the media. The FBI took over the case, and Vaughn was arrested. However, before his trial, he was granted one phone call. Chapter 5. The Shocking Twist. The day of the trial arrived. Vaughn, ever composed, still wore that infuriating smirk. As the prosecution presented the damning evidence, a sudden explosion echoed outside the courthouse. In the ensuing chaos, Vaughn vanished. His lawyers had orchestrated his escape before he could be sentenced. When Ethan and Sarah learned of it, they rushed to action. But it was too late. Vaughn had disappeared without a trace. "Is it over?" Sarah asked. "No," Ethan replied. "Not even close." Epilogue. Justice never sleeps, months later. One late night, Ethan returned home to find an envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a single note. Justice is shaped by the powerful. We will meet again. Vaughn? Ethan smirked. This wasn't over, and he was ready for the fight. Vaughn's escape had driven Ethan and Sarah to the edge. The FBI and police force mobilized immediately, but Vaughn's connections ran deep. It was believed he had fled the country on a private jet, yet Ethan's instincts told him something was off. Vaughn wouldn't just run. He was more than a corrupt judge. He was one of the most dangerous men within the system. He had to have a plan B. Sarah pulled Vaughn's last phone call records before his escape. The call had been made to a private dock in Miami. He didn't leave, Ethan, Sarah said excitedly. He's still here, but we need to move fast if we're going to catch him. Ethan wasted no time. He gathered the team and headed straight for Miami. Vaughn's plan was now clear. He was going to escape by yacht, heading for South America. The police and FBI surrounded one of Miami's largest yacht marinas. As Ethan and Sarah arrived, they spotted Vaughn's men, clearly on high alert. Vaughn himself sat inside a black SUV, flanked by armed bodyguards. What he didn't know was that this time, every single move he made was being watched. All marina exits were sealed off. Helicopters hovered overhead, tracking Vaughn's movements. Ethan hacked into the marina's security cameras, pinpointing Vaughn's exact location. Just as Vaughn attempted to make his escape, police cruisers blocked his path. He and his men tried to find another way out, but this time, he wasn't just facing Ethan. He was up against an entire tactical unit. "It's over, Vaughn," Ethan shouted, aiming his gun at him. Vaughn hesitated for a moment, then, maintaining his usual calm demeanor, he opened the car door and stepped out. He scanned his surroundings before turning to Ethan with his signature smirk. "I told you once, Ethan," he said smoothly. "Justice is shaped by the powerful." Ethan didn't lower his gun. "Yeah, but this time, justice is sending you exactly where you belong." Realizing there was no escape, Vaughn reached for his gun. But Sarah was faster. A single shot rang out, striking Vaughn's weapon and knocking it from his grasp. He stumbled, defeated. Within seconds, officers swarmed him, slapping handcuffs around his wrists. Ethan stepped forward, looking Vaughn dead in the eyes. Then, in a low, firm voice, he said, "For my father." For the first time, Vaughn's expression faltered. His smirk vanished. The power he once held was gone. The system no longer protected him. This time, he had truly lost. Richard Vaughn was sentenced to life in prison for bribery, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. As Ethan watched from the courtroom, Vaughn lowered his head in silence. The man who had once controlled the system now sat behind bars. A nobody. Sarah leaned over and whispered, "How do you feel?" "My father can finally rest," Ethan replied, "but we still have a fight ahead of us. Justice in Chicago isn't finished yet." The end. True justice. That night, the Chicago sky was filled with stars. As Ethan stood watching the city lights, he felt something shift within him. This case was over. But the fight for justice never truly ended. Because in the shadows, there would always be another Vaughn. And Ethan, he would always be the one hunting them down.